Hello, everyone. Excuse me. At least I hope someone's out there. I know it's been a while since this show was on. I guess this is I think I missed two. But let me know if you can see me and hear me, if you're out there, if you exist. I know this is kind of a weird day for we Reaper fans. A weird time, not just a day. There's green users, Bob and Julie. I'm guessing Quindy's out there, but she has not confirmed yet. But if not, we're on our own. We'll have to figure some stuff out. There's Beguiler87, Kuriniko. I'm sending hugs back, Kuriniko. And also to Bob and Julie, Chris V, Lori Nan. Yeah, it's a Samurai Jack. It was definitely hard to hear news, and sad for all of us, really, in a way. Even if you didn't know Ed, if you're a Reaper fan, he had a big impact on your life. He certainly had a big impact on mine. Hi, Mikey RR. So, and if anyone wants to share some stories of meeting Ed, or online interactions count as meeting too, obviously, feel free in the chat. One of the comforts I have been taking is over on Facebook. A lot of people have posted, just general, condolences and tributes, but a lot of people are sharing specific interactions or events or stories they heard from Ed, and I've really been enjoying reading those. And some of them, amazingly, some of them I hadn't heard of before, because Ed was a storyteller, and I don't think he could ever run out of stories. And even though I've had the opportunity to ride in cars with him, he's driven me to the airport a few times, and go to dinner with him and just hang out. And when the smaller group of the artists are there, we hang out in a side room and paint and sculpt, and Ed will come in and talk to people, and we've had chances to hear lots of stories. And I'm sure I probably haven't even heard a quarter of his stories in all that time. Valor the Red is here. Yes, Chrissy V, it can. It can mean a lot to find out how much someone meant to other people, and what kinds of impact that it's had on people's lives. This is, even before this happened, I haven't been doing that great lately, and that's why I missed two shows, is I've been having some back problems. So this is literally my first time back at the paint table. I'm going to try with a miniature. I'm going to try going back to Tentacle Guy, because I've been looking at him on my shelf for like weeks now. But if my back starts complaining, I've also set up so I can do some color mixing stuff that, I'll be able to sit up straight, and that should be fine. If anyone would ever like to avoid being in this situation, I suggest you look up tech neck. I think that's what the kids like to call it these days. Which is, well, here, I'll go back to the other view. Many things that we like to do in life are bad for our back. So one of them is, hunching over, looking at your phone, very bad. It's better, if you can hold it up here. And then even one video I saw said support the arm that's holding your phone with the other arm, and keep them tight into your body so they aren't kind of hanging out and putting more stress on things. But obviously painting is something that we hunch over and do, and sitting at our computer desks, if you work in an office or you like to use the computer a lot in your leisure time. These are all things that I do much of, and our backs apparently wish that we would not. So the first week or so, I just thought that, I was having some muscle tension. I'd actually been trying to stretch, and I thought, well, maybe it's just everything getting used to moving and stuff. And then after a while, the jabbing pain it's kind of like at the bottom of my shoulder blade. And it was just this stabbing thing. And I went in and I got a steroid shot, and it really didn't seem to do much. And then I was like, oh, this is nerve pain, because I have had this once before, like 30 years ago. And it is no fun. So I was trying to do some exercises that I knew about for it. And I think everything was just too angry for that, even to do the therapeutic exercises. So then I was just like, all right, I'm not doing anything. I'm going to keep my arms, I have pillows and stuff. I keep my arms supported. I'm not going to go on the computer at all. I'm not going to, try to do anything where I'm going to be in that position. Hey, Quindy. I think we're all right technically. I don't think there have been any technical problems. We were, of course, talking a little bit about Ed, and I'm guessing that we will continue to talk about Ed as people come and go. And it's a big shock for our Reaper family, our Reaper fandom, whatever you'd like to refer to it as. But I was also talking about why I haven't done the show for a while, which is jacking up my back. So this is my first attempt to let my arm do things for a while. It's not in my arm, it's in the neck, but if you hold your arm out unsupported, that pulls on the nerve, and then that doesn't feel good. And I can tell when it's getting better and worse now because it moves up. When it's getting better, they call it centralization. And then it moves down back into that original spot or down the side of my arm. But here, I will show you one more thing. So I got a deep tissue massage after, which I do all the time. And I was like, apparently incredibly, incredibly tight. Like he said, was not even doing it as hard as he normally does, which is not as hard as he normally does it on people who aren't super tense, apparently. I've taken some pictures for reference, but my cover story is that, Santa's elves were punching me with their tiny little fists because I'm not getting in the holiday spirit yet. Because it all looks like little... Hi, Diomedes Industries, and thank you. Yeah, we're all a little stunned, I think. Stunned is probably a good way to describe it. And for anyone who came in after we were talking about Ed a little bit previously, if you have any stories you'd like to share of interactions with Ed, how he's impacted your life, how Reaper's impacted your life, we would be happy to hear them. I know that Reaper and Ed have certainly had a big impact on my life because I honestly have no idea what I'd be doing if Reaper hadn't made those Learn to Paint kits and then had conventions and had wonderful, nice people that welcomed me into doing this. Kuniko says, be wary about going on to nerve painkillers. I've tried 4 types in the last year or so, and the side effects are not great at all. I've just been sticking with muscle relaxants for now. I can't take NSAIDs. Super fun for me. You always go to the doctor and they're like, oh, Tylenol doesn't hardly do anything. And I'm like, yeah, which of us knows that better? I think me, the person that can only take Tylenol. I was desperate enough that I did take some NSAIDs because I'm like, oh, if I feel it starting to hit my stomach, I can back off, but I'll at least give it a shot. I'm like, no. The stretches help more than anything, really. But it's like I kind of have to be... I think I'm still being a little cautious that I don't overdo it and anger the nerve gods. Hinton BE. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Ed, but I do know Reaper was very instrumental for me in getting into the hobby. Yeah, they make it very easy for us to get into the hobby, and I'm very grateful about that. I first encountered them, I didn't start painting right away, but I first encountered them at our local hobby shop. Had like all of the, hey Trashorama, 40 months. Wow, thanks for many long subbing. So I've got some pinks here in addition to the colors I used last time, but let's mention the colors I used last time. So the Knoll Pelt is that lighter green, and I'm going to beef that up a little bit, I think. When I was looking at it, I could see some places where it looked like the underlying, plastic might be showing through a little, so I want to make sure I beef that up. Then I had Olive Drab. Is kind of the middle color. Then Gogger Green is the darker color, but as I was working on it, I wanted to go darker still, and I started messing around with these purples. You can kind of see up there, but it's also kind of in some of the shadows, and I liked that effect a lot. And then as I've been looking at this on my shelf for many, many weeks while I have not been painting, I'm just feeling like I need to bring some pink in. So I grabbed a bunch of pinks, and I don't know which one I'm going to end up using yet, but I guess I'll put them down from lightest to darkest. Are these two actually pretty similar? Yes. So eliminate that one. And then I brought a purple just in case I turn out wrong about the pinks. And I brought yellow ochre. Let's call it ochre from now on. Yellow ochre, but a kind of a transparent one to mix highlights for the green, probably. I don't know. I'm doing a little not super planning in advance on this, which is, honestly, how I paint sometimes. Although I have increasingly found that being willing to do some planning can make your life easier. So do some color tests, and we've talked about that on previous shows, stuff like that. All right, so I've got Milani Rose as a light pink. That's from the Pathfinder paints. And Monster Maw. And then a darker one, because I know that the value of that area where the tentacles meet the brain is dark, so that even though my impulse is that I need something lighter there, I might be wrong and I might have to lighten up. So I brought Runic Glow just in case those other two pinks were too light. And then just in case pink turns out to be completely wrong and I need more of a purple, I grabbed Amethyst Purple, which I can mix with the darker purples I brought if necessary. And I've got, I always keep a set of the paints from the Learn to Paint kits and the newer expansions to the Learn to Paint kits. I don't know where I'm trying to put this. Nearby, so if I need something else, I can use that. And honestly, I still have all the paints in August. I think, like, it was part of ReaperCon preparation. I did an article and a stream on getting a smaller paint set for travel, or if you have to work in a compact area. So like 15 to 25 colors you could use as a compact paint set. And I have most of the candidates I've used for that still here, because I have this project I want to do where I paint out some of them, and I have not gotten to that project. If it turns out that I can't do like real painting for a while, that will be an excellent substitute activity. Let me know if I'm like not remotely staying in frame. I tested a little, but I am pretty darn out of practice at everything, really. Like, friends have invited us to events, and I'm like, no, I can't go. They don't have the kind of chairs I can sit in right now there. It's like, wow, that is feels very goofy, but there it is. Because I've always liked to, ever since I started having back problems, I like to sit up really straight. So places with booths are what's best for me. Chairs can be really all over the map. But a booth is generally just an L-shaped thing with padding, and that works out pretty well for me. Actually, it looks like this medium green has some places where I'm seeing through to the underside as well, or that, the underlying plastic surface. And I want to make sure that I mean, partly I just want it to look nice from a color point of view, but also I want to make sure there's a nice sturdy paint film on there to minimize the likelihood that this will chip off later. So I'm doing some more wet blending, which is what happened a lot in the previous episode where I initially set up all what's happening with the tentacles. And that's what's nice about these big surfaces. If I thought about it, I would have tried to come up with some sort of something I could do. I don't have a house paintbrush, and I lack Ed's talent in that area. Or Ed's, it's not talent, it's experience and practice. But mostly I just don't have a good house paintbrush. But maybe next week I'll try to find something big and a big brush, if not an actual house paintbrush. And if you haven't seen Ed do that, I don't know, Quinty, do you know if it's up as a separate thing, or you have to kind of comb through the streams from 2021 ReaperCon to find Ed painting the pirate ship with a literal house paint brush. Because you should watch it. I just wow. It blew my mind, and I had so much fun watching it, and I enjoyed watching Ed have so much fun. And if you need to paint a giant pirate ship or other terrain or stuff like that, it will also be very educational. Chris V, I so need to learn that philosophy. I always buy every color and then barely use most of them. I would go to a regular painting night and haul hundreds of paint bottles because I never knew what I was going to use. I mean, I have hundreds of paints and I like to use them. I mean, I would encourage you to start using them. Here's what I might tell you to do is the next thing you paint, don't let yourself use any of your tried and true colors. Or like, I mean, if you have to use black and white or whatever, that's more of a utility color than a tried and true color. But make yourself use a different blue than the one you always reach for, a different green than the one you always reach for. And then you'll start getting to know those new paints and thinking of ways you can incorporate them in the future, and they'll start becoming some of your tried or true colors as well. Because I've had that, like there's been times when I get a whole bunch of paint at once. Like when the Pathfinder set came out, that was like what, 54 new colors, and then I think there were ReaperCon colors because I got it here. So it was like I got like a whole bunch of paint at once and I didn't use it for a while. So every now and then I will sit down and say, I'm painting this miniature and I'm only using this stuff. And that pushes me to get to know those paints. And now I love some of those Pathfinder paints. I use them all the time, like I grab for that pink. The other thing that I have found super helpful is doing this swatching stuff. I can see exactly what color it is, and so I can like, oh, this one would work as a highlight for that one. This one would work as a wash for that one. And it was a ton of work, but I do not regret that in any way. And I know I have like 2 or 3 episodes on swatching because we talked about that several times in the first year or two that this show was on. But I do not know offhand the episode numbers, but they are on Reaper's YouTube. And then there's a Beyond the Kit playlist. So in there are a couple of different episodes. And this is not the only way to do this. If like some people would prefer having it on pieces of paper because then you can kind of move them around and check your color composition that you're thinking of painting on something, or they're more portable. Some people would rather have them in a book. There's a lot of different ways to do them, but the concept of actually painting out your things so you can see what color they are is a very useful thing to do and will help you choose colors. And in the experience of swatching things, and I had swatched the Pathfinder paint colors is how I did know what some of them that I liked, because I took pictures and shared them for other people. So if people were thinking about getting those sets, they could get an idea of what the colors were. And I'd done that in a notebook many years ago. But I rarely found that I regret doing swatches and stuff like that. Or color tests before I start painting. Just sitting down playing on stuff on your palette even. Like sometimes we're like overly precious about paint, and learning stuff makes it not a waste. So if you're experimenting and you're learning things, you are not wasting paint. You're learning things. Yes, you may go through more paint than you would have otherwise, but it's not a waste. It accomplished something. Another way to do that is whatever you have left on your palette at the end of a session, just start mixing some stuff together and see what happens. Maybe guess if I mix this with this, what would happen? And then see if that is indeed what happens when you do that. All right. I think maybe I just wiped off some of the paint on that. So I'll put it back. It's tricky because he's got a couple, like this one here. It's a really nice dynamic sculpt, but it makes it hard to paint all of them at the same time. So this one starts here, goes down, goes under that one, and then folds under the body. So I may or may not get too fancy with that one. And I don't want it too bright back here because I don't want people looking there too much, for one thing, because that area is really hard to reach, so it will not be painted super awesomely down there. But that is far from, the story or the most interesting part of that figure down on the ground where the tentacle's resting. So I want to try to keep people looking around here more in the scary area where the tentacles are not calmly at rest, but instead where they are threatening scariness. Maybe that would be a good one to try some tests with some pink before I get too invested in it on other places. So let's see. What would happen? So I'm actually going to mix the pink in with the green initially. And interestingly, it's made like actually a very nice skin tone. But that should work well because that kind of, I think, this is skin, and I think that's kind of the vibe that I was looking for when I was thinking that there should be some pink somewhere on here. So it kind of has a peachy quality going down. Just try to blend it in a little. I might apply it in a more textural way on some of the tentacles that I can actually reach. But I'm not going to worry about it too much on this one. I might even just call that mostly done and then work to not mess it up when I paint the other one. Did I even get to the end? Well, there's that side too, but maybe I will get to that side now. Chris V, thank you. I'm actually coming back to painting after a break of many years, so I'm trying to remember everything and learn new ways to approach it. You'll be amazed at how much there is to learn now, but don't feel like you have to do it all in a day. Like, don't put yourself under a lot of pressure that you have to know this technique or paint as well as that person. Like, just remember the fun of it first before you drive yourself nuts with comparisons. Never drive yourself nuts with comparisons if you can avoid it. But before you start making yourself crazy, concentrate on the fun. Am I staying on frame? I am not sure. That section is fun to reach. All right. Sorry, I guess I'm having to concentrate a bit because it's been so long since I've done this. I mean, it's not exactly like you forget, you're just less practiced. I mean, this is certainly the kind of skill that if you can practice it regularly, you'll stay in shape, as it were. But you won't, a long absence, like Chris is talking about, that can have a more dramatic effect. And you will kind of have to, not come back in expecting yourself to be exactly where you left off. Which it doesn't sound like Chris is doing that. I'm just saying, if you're ever in that position, do it like he's doing it and give yourself a chance to get back in the swing of things. Just trying to add a little bit of that notes of pink. the darker part as well. Kind of double as highlighting and visual interest, I guess. Say. And I might find that I have to come over and, finesse some of these transitions after it dries. I am definitely not the world's best wet blender. And it can get trickier when you're using colors that aren't, like the closer colors are to each other. If I was doing this with a light green, some of the weird transitions would be less noticeable. But I also figure since it is skin and it is a monster, if it looks a little, it's not going to be super, it's not like clothing where it should be very uniform and smooth and everything. There can be mottling and whatnot. Chris V, to be honest, I wasn't that great back then. I'm good friends with Greg Zuniga and he's been helping me get back into it. Oh, Greg is such a wonderful guy. Yes, you could not have a better person to help you dive back in. He knows a lot and he's incredibly patient. And fun. I feel like we still need a little bit of lighter stuff up here, even though this isn't. And here there is even like little bumpy textures on the, let's zoom in a little bumpy textures on the top of the tentacles. So I definitely shouldn't feel like I need to paint smooth. In fact, maybe I even want to get a smaller brush and not paint smooth on purpose. But we'll see. I was partly working on beefing up sections that didn't have enough underlying paint, so I don't want to dump this bigger brush just yet until I have accomplished that goal. Like there is a section that doesn't have any paint at all. And I can see gray. But yes, I've tried to get better at talking while I paint. But I am not the best multitasker in the world. Or probably in this chat room. Since I am not much of a multitasker at all. I don't know if he's been doing it lately, but I know that Greg streams as well. Greg Zuniga, and I'm trying to think Wicked Elf is his name here, so if you want to search for that, that's another person you could follow who does painting stuff. I feel like he used to do Friday and I want to say Sunday night. So I am having to move this guy quite a lot because of how dynamic and everywhere the tentacles are. So it's good that the tentacles are dynamic and everywhere, but it probably, hopefully is not making you guys dizzy. Wicked Elf Neolus. Yes, thank you. That is the name to search for. And Shelfie4 is confirming that he streams on Friday evenings and usually Sundays from 12 to 3 p.m. Yes, Eastern Time. And I think he still do two different subjects. Like one, he'll be working on more like army painting, and the other one he's working on busts and other display painting projects. But I don't know if he's still splitting up like that. I end up not watching that many Twitch streams because I don't know, I am very bad at the time management, like I said, and I'm trying to work on my blog posts and whatever I'm supposed to be painting for Ron or somebody else. And I just seem to lack the time management skills to do all of that and squeeze in a lot of viewing as well. I haven't been studying traditional art as much, but I very much would like to get back to that in the new year, if not sooner. I don't know. For a long time, it was kind of the thing I did that, if I wanted to zen out and not think about stuff, it was the thing that I did that worked for that. And then for some reason, it just stopped working like that, and I just was, I don't know, getting too much in my head about not being great at it or something. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what happened, why I'm not finding it as fun as I used to. But I figure I'll just brute force it at this point and try doing it until I rediscover the fun. And I'm sure that there are people, maybe in this chat, maybe not, who've had similar situations with miniature painting where, it's your hobby and you loved it, but then you're just going through a period of time where it just seems more frustrating than fun. I mean, that probably happens with any hobby or interest. But I tried giving myself a break, so now I think I'm going to try not giving myself a break and see what that does. I will come back to the pink bits on that one. But I'm finding there are more places than I realized where I can see some plastic shining through. So I want to beef that up. Did I use a different purple? I literally don't think that I painted since my last show with you. Oh, Shalafi 4, also General Hi from the Hobby U crew. Please say hi back. I always have such a great time with the Hobby U people and your events. I would come out more if it wasn't, inconveniently located for me geographically and requiring plane flights and so on. I'd been invited to the summer one, but that I think the summer event is almost invariably the same weekend as my birthday. So I've usually made other plans. All right. Oh, I did not get the light color where you can probably see the plastic shining through. There's a spot. I don't think that's a spot. I think that's just patchy paint, but I'll add another coat of that later. Green while I've got it. And then go to the place that was patchy. On some of these tentacles, it doesn't look like I got the color this bright green enough. And that's part of what I wanted, was that color shift, just to keep things interesting. Anywhere you got a lot of a thing, if you add some variation with the color, it helps make it more interesting to look at. Like, you think about dragons and just a lot of scales, so you'll see people working in different colors. Like even though I painted the little Rocky the Red dragons, and I used a lot of purple and stuff in the shadows, partly because purple is a good shadow for red anyway, but it helped add some visual interest as well. Mix things up a little. And here's purple being a good shadow for green, because purple is magic, like that. Although I'm not entirely using it as a shadow color here, somewhat it's the variation in the actual creature as much as a shadow color, but it's sort of serving double duty. on that front. And if you haven't tried wet blending before, I definitely recommend things with irregular surfaces. It is much more forgiving. It gives you a little bit more time to, start figuring out how to manipulate the paint and whatnot before you're worrying about making some amazing cloak. I mean, actually, I can't make an amazing cloak with wet blending. I might occasionally use it to establish like an overall thing, and then I'm going to come back with my slow way and kind of fix the problems. I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of staying in frame or not. Let's put some of this purple here. Not all purple, some green too. And then what was the other one I had? Burgundy wine, which is like kind of purplish, but it seems red on my palette. So I think it's going to dry. There are some colors where the color shifts just a little. Well, I guess it'd be better if I put it there. When it dries. And burgundy wine may be one of those. Let's see. Hinton B started painting minis almost 20 years ago, but there have been several times where I've taken a break. A couple of times it was for years. Yep, sometimes you just can't. Oh, and I had missed where Shalafi 4 said that Greg Zuniga streams Bus on Friday and then something else on Sundays. Currently, it has been his Blood Bowl team. And Crispy stopped going to HMGS cons, which is... Am I going to remember the acronym? No, I'm not. Historical meaning... Somebody say it in the chat. But anyway, if you live in the area, which I think is like Pennsylvania-ish, you should definitely go to these cons, even if you're not into like military gaming. They have the Hobby U classes, they have really good paint classes, and other events. Valender the Red, the cow that jumped over the moon did not factor in re-entry issues, and that's how ground beef was invented. Shalafi 4, the second cow also miscalculated and came in butt first. That's how you got rump roast. Chris V wants Hobby U to live on, and Greg is running it now. So, and everyone's working to kind of rebuild it right now, because I'm guessing, like everything else, it got impacted by the past few years of weirdness. I know that I haven't heard anything from the people who used to run our local. We had a local convention that would raise money for Save. They called it Save versus Hunger. They'd raise money for Second Harvest. In fact, we would even do it at the Second Harvest facility in our town. And I would go there and run paint and takes. And I haven't heard anything from those guys in quite a while. So I don't know if, they just couldn't quite get it figured all out for this year, or if they're, we're maybe not going to be doing it anymore. I've been I'm still a little cautious. I mean, I'm old and I'm tired of not feeling well. I did get sick after ReaperCon. It was not COVID, but it was some pretty fun con crud. So ReaperCon was able to tempt me out, but not a lot of other events have been able to do that. Because I'm still kind Gosh, just about not wanting to get sick. I'm older than I like to admit. Actually, I don't lie about my age. I don't know why I said that. I don't make a secret of my age. I'm 55. And I'm still not old enough to know better. See, that transition looks a little too janky. And there's a lot of jankiness going on in this section in general. But actually, if I were smart, I would not touch that, because you can see how some sections look a little more matte than others. That means the paint is is dry in some places and not dry in others. And if I start touching the parts that are dry, this is one of the risks of wet blending, is that if you mess with paint that's starting to dry, you can start lifting it up instead of smoothing it or putting it down. So I'm not going to touch the far end of the tentacle that looks a little more matte until it's dried overall and I can come back in on a second pass. Because that is yes, there's the time pressure for wet blending of, working on everything while it's wet enough to handle it. But it's not like you only get one shot. It's not like you can't come back and do more later. It often benefits from coming back and doing more later. So, and then these earlier tentacles that I've been working on are going to be dry by the time I circle back around, so I can start either on the next phase or messing with them. I think this green has some drying shift too. It's not quite as vivid once it's dry. Or I need to build it up more, but I think it's just not quite as vivid once it's dry. So I might want to mix in some of that yellow or go over it with the yellow if I want that brighter look. But first I'm just making sure I have enough built up on those places that we're looking. Kind of, I can see stuff. I can see stuff through. Make sure that I'm not dulling it down by seeing some of the, it's that lighter gray plastic, I think. So it would dull things down. Like if you add gray to something, if you got paint that's too bright, like you didn't want to paint with the green this bright, that is a good way to dull it down, is to add gray to it. I keep forgetting that I need to be holding the miniature higher so I don't bend my neck. So that's one of the reasons he keeps coming closer and further away. Sorry. And if I feel like I'm losing too much of those purples, I don't have to worry about that too much, because I can come back in after things are dry and start putting them back in with glazes or washes. Where the purple is and the strength of it does not have to be perfected in this stage of the proceedings. Nothing has to be perfected in this stage of the proceedings. Yeah, I feel like that did brighten that up a little. So I think that this green just needs a good few coats to be nice and punchy, like I want it. Nice noxious green. Figured it would play well off the, the reds and pinks and purples in the brain and make sure that this guy continues looking pretty gross. Because that's actually how this figure got started, is for Valentine's Day. I wanted to paint some pinks, and I did do a nice dress on a different figure. But I also wanted to demonstrate that you could use pinks for non-pretty miniatures. Pinks are definitely valuable colors for more than just princesses and so on. So I grabbed this guy. I also painted a leech in kind of pinks and peaches, I think. And even though I'm using a wet palette, maybe it needs a little more water. Because it's the time of year where the furnace is coming on, my paint is drying out fast. I'm gonna get some fresh paint. I don't thin the wet palette enough when I do the show, because I know that I'm gonna move my palette around, and I also know that I am not the most coordinated person. So to prevent incidents, like me putting drops of paint on my desk and stuff, and scaring myself because I meant to change my shirt before I started the show. I was gonna put one of my nice Reaper shirts on, and then I totally blanked. Let's see. Chris has confirmed that the acronym means Historical Miniature Gaming Society. So Cold Wars is one of their cons. I think if you do coldwars.com, you'll end up on a web page, and then look for the Hobby U section. And then I'm blanking on the names of they do 3 cons a year. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. Oh, and Chris has made it to one ReaperCon in 2010. You need to come back, because ReaperCon is like all grown up now. It's a big, real con. Nothing like back. I mean, I kind of miss the smaller days, but it's super cool seeing it so successful and so many people there, and so many classes and instructors. And just to share an Ed story, they used to feed all of the artists kind of at the same time, like they'd take us out to dinner or something at ReaperCon. And often what we would do actually is go over to Ed's house, and they'd bring in like big trays of enchiladas or something, like the barbecue, stuff like that. And we'd all get to just hang out and eat at Ed's house, which was super fun. Very generous of Ed to open his house up to a bunch of insane miniature painters. And sculptors. Julie and Bob were there before I was. I think that they did even more stuff with Ed back when it wasn't even a smaller crew. But yeah, it used to, I mean, my first ReaperCon, I feel like there were like 3... Well, no, there were more. There were like 4 or 5 painters, and then 6 or 7 sculptors, something like that. It was a much smaller group. And my first ReaperCon, I didn't go and teach or anything. I was there as an attendee. But the artists had a room they hung out in, much like Artist Alley is now, where you could come and talk to them and stuff. So that is how I saw the numbers, even though I was not amongst the numbers. And probably that first year I was too shy to really talk to anybody much anyway, I bet. I bet I was a dum-dum and didn't say anything until the next year. So if you do come out to ReaperCon and you're feeling awkward, because you're like, well, I'm an awkward introvert. It's like, well, guess what? Everyone in the room, well, not everyone, because you got people like Ed who were just a dream for introverts, because you could say 1 or 2 things and that would be enough to remind him of many, many different stories to carry the conversation if you weren't feeling like you knew what to say. Ed was a wonderful person to hang out with, because he would fill the awkward silences, and also regale you with super fun, interesting stories. I'm never tired of hearing Ed stories. Chris V, I liked hanging in the warehouse and store. Yes, it was a modest thing. It wasn't like one of these big fancy cons like it is now, but it was still super fun. It was way more relaxed. Like the scheduled events would pretty much stop at 6 or 7, and then it would just be like people hanging out. I think one or 2 years, even back in the day, they did a few night things. Because I would usually I would volunteer to do evening classes because I'm more of a night person. It's funny, the vast majority of the people, like the long-time core Reaper instructors, are morning people, and they're like, "Oh, I want to get my classes over with. I want to do the 9 a.m. slot." And it's like, I do not make sense at 9 a.m. Like, I'll be awake, I'll be wandering around, but I will not be putting the words in any kind of order at 9 a.m. I would like to have the after lunch slot, please. And I never really had to fight with anyone for that. I think I still don't. Even now, when instructors go to sign up, it's all technological and advanced now. The morning classes are the ones that people fight over, that fill up the fastest. Back in the day, it was Anne with a bunch of index cards, I think, and figuring out who was in what slot where, and she'd move them around. It was something, she'd try to respect our preferences. She didn't make me try to make sense in the morning, for example. But I don't envy her trying to figure all that out without technological aid, even. So say what you want about the grow ticks, and there's a lot you can say about grow ticks, but that kind of technical thing where you can enter things and the computer detects if stuff is full and stuff like that, that is a nice thing. I don't know what's going on down in that corner, but I also think that unless you're looking at him from that orientation, you probably won't see that corner, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. Oh yes, I was in the Nerf fight in 2020. Yes, laughing my butt off because I like Nerf. And when I was a kid, Nerf was a ball. It was a ball that you could play with in the house. And I love that it's all these like Nerf bow and arrow and machine guns and all these crazy things now. Yeah, in case anyone didn't believe me when I said I was old before, I'm pretty sure that my Nerf ball story confirms it. I'm not even getting to the paint part, am I? Sometimes paint is like that. You have this part that you want to get to. It's the part you're excited about or the thing you want to practice or whatever, and then you got to do all these other silly things before you can get there. But that is just part of the deal. I try to accept it. Now I am breaking one of the rules that I usually tell you guys, to not move your painting hand, to move the figure. But there are exceptions to every rule, and with some configurations of shapes, it's just going to be easier to move your paint hand. But yes, if anyone here is new, and I think it does seem like we might have a few people haven't been on this show before, I'm not saying that you're new to the Reaper channel or whatnot. That is a piece of advice I like to remind people about is move this way, put your miniatures on a holder and you move this hand can gyrate and make whatever kind of contortions you want, but try to keep your brush hand making the same motions as much as possible, and you will get better and better at making those motions and improve your brush control. Chris V is trying to decide on pulling the trigger on Bones paint. So specifically the Bones line, not the Reaper paints in general, but this one specifically. I think this ogre skin is... no. Well, yeah. All right, so now they just call it paint. So the Reaper is not breaking it out into lines. I mean, the Pathfinder thing is different because that's a licensed line. But they're not making a distinction between core and bones in words. I mean, the differences that exist between them are, well, I mean, anything with this 9.4. I don't think, have they gone past 9.4? I don't think they have. But these are going to be made in general to be a little more opaque. Now, I happen to have picked two that were a little less so. Partly that's just the nature of pigment. Partly it's what I wanted for this project. But overall, I don't think I have other ones here right now. Oh, the Monster Maw is also a Bones. It's pretty opaque. So overall, they're going to be on the more opaque side, with the idea that that's more appealing for people who are painting for games. So they want to paint faster. So there's that factor, but then also there's no triad. So this is not part of a triad. It's just ogre skin. And in fact, this is the next color down. And these are not intended to go together at all. It just happens that I picked ones that would work together as, a midtone and a highlight. But that the line overall is not designed in that way. And I think I like oh, this is also a Bones. This is Sticks Purple. The metallics are a different, newer formulation that wasn't available when Anne was developing the core lines. And they are, I really like the metallics in the Bones line. They're very shiny. They're solid colors, like the types of gold and bronze and all that kind of stuff. So I would say go ahead and try the metallics, even if you don't want to try the rest of them. And if you haven't touched your paints in a while, you might want to check your metallics, because I feel like metallics go over, like they start to gunk up sooner. So if you didn't run paint maintenance on your paints, and if Quindy is kind, she will find an article on my website that talks about how to do paint maintenance on your paints, which I would recommend if you are using them for the first time in many years. Some of them will need to be shaken and stirred, and some of them will need to have water added. And you can't always tell just from like dispensing a drop. Like sometimes the part up in the top will be fine, but this part might be starting to separate or gunk up, or vice versa. I mean, I'll often find that paint gets stuck up here and it seems like it's all gooped up, but if I pop that off, the rest of the paint is fine. I just need to grab that paint, put it down in with the rest of it, and stir or shake it. But if Quindy can find that article, and even if you go to the front page of my website, which is, up there, it's in the table of contents. You should be able to find it. Something about how to maintain your paints or something like that. And it runs through like useful tools and what to look for and how to do it. And I would very much recommend that you do that. But I bet if you have losses, metallics might be among them. A vortex mixture is good, but often you have to stir. Like you have to pop the thing off and stir with, I used to have like stir sticks, like cocktail stir sticks or something like that. These are out of old windshield wipers, and it's flat, kind of like a artist's painting knife, but a the palette knife. Palette knives, I don't think they make one that's narrow enough to go through the neck of our bottle. But it makes it easier to just kind of scrape it off the side and not waste a lot of paint. Or just make the whole exercise very messy. You definitely don't want to wear a shirt you like for that one. Or do it on like your antique table or whatever. That can end up, that is like one of the messiest things to do in miniature painting. But I highly recommend that. I think it's good to do it at least every 2 years. But certainly if you have not been using your paints for a while. I mean, I love my Vortex mixer and it does a good job, but I have more than once been, doing paint maintenance, and I start with the mixer and then I dispense a drop to check it and everything looks okay. But I pop the lid off and I find out that there's stuff going on. So stirring, there's really no substitute for stirring. They do make little electric stirrers. I don't think that is necessary. I think once you just get stuff going, then you can pop it on the Vortex mixer and it'll work great. When I add water, I do like to use distilled water. I know there are people who use it for their rinse water or whatever too, and I'm not that fanatical about it. But if I'm actually adding to paint, I would rather add distilled water because the water in my area has a lot of minerals and stuff. And as gunked up as our shower door and pet fountains and everything else gets, I don't want that in my paint. So it's worth the effort to me to do that, but you may not have annoying water like that where you live. And not feel like you need to do that. And if you didn't, if you added regular water, you haven't ruined your paint or anything. I'm just mentioning. Something to think about kind of more long term. It's entirely possible that some of your paints from 2009 are still in great shape. It's so weird that you can, the bottles seem the same, but you'll have one paint that's had problems and then 10 or 12 paints that you bought at the same time that are fine. But that's why it's worth going through. And then once you figure out, if you have a few losses, maybe order some of the previously called Bones line paints in those colors and try them out for a little while and see what you think of them. I mean, I think it's worth owning the whole line, but I have 800 or 900 paints, so I may not be a completely rational source of advice on the topic of how many paints one person should have. That's why it took me so long to write that article. People kept saying, well, if you could only buy 12 paints, if you could only buy 18 paints, it's like, well, I don't do that though. That's not how I paint. That's not what I do. But once I started studying traditional art a little more, I got to understand a bit more how you mix colors and how you work with just a small set of colors. So even though I don't do it a lot for miniature painting, I felt like I was qualified enough to answer the question at last because I ducked that question for many, 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 many years. But someone finally asked me when I was like, all right, I guess it's not complete insanity for me to opine on this topic. But yeah, I'm definitely going to have to come back and add some of those purples and whatever burgundy wine is back in, because that's what makes it look a little sickly. And I want a nice sickly green. Let's see where I put those. Yep, so this is a paint that has what we would call a drying shift, which basically it looks like a different color when it's wet than when it's dry. So I have it on my palette here, and I'll put out a fresh bit. in a minute. That's funny because normally the camera loves to focus on the palette and will not focus on the miniature. So it's red, but then as I pull it away, you start seeing the purple undertones a little more. And I'll put a fresh drop out just to confirm that I have not mixed up colors. But then this is the color that it appears when dry. So I'll put a little drop of that on here again. And it's subtle. It may not be that obvious on the screen because I don't know how well my camera is going to pick that up. But this definitely, it has like a redder hue when it's wet than when it's dry. Pendrake is asking what causes drying shift. Certain pigments, I think, is basically... acrylic actually has less of it than some other kinds of... Like, this would not be considered drastic in watercolor or gouache, I don't think. There, it's usually the value that shifts more than the hue. It may, well, okay, this may be one of those things where it's more obvious on camera than it is in person. I don't know. But yeah, there are watercolor paints that shift 30%. Like they go 30% lighter or 30% darker. I think, or 30, 40% are the ones that are kind of the worst for it. And gouache is pretty known for light colors are going to look darker when they dry, and dark colors are going to look lighter when they dry. Like to the point where it seems bad enough in gouache that it's really hard. Like if I'm trying to, mix to match this because I chipped some off or whatever, it might be challenging, but it's way more challenging to mix to match things you've already done in gouache because the drying shift is so dramatic. So we're actually in acrylics, we're less disturbed or less damp. We don't have to deal with it as much. Like it's still a thing, but it's not as bad as it could be. And I tend to find there are just a few colors that I find it happening with. And I guess I probably never noticed with burgundy wine before because I'm not likely to use it straight very often. I love it mixing shadows or doing glazes or something, but I'm not generally using it in a context where I'd be like, oh, wow, that looks different. But because I did these swatches, because I'm showing you guys, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at a palette and I'm going, what? It looks so red there. Did I pick up a different thing? And I'm like, but all I have is that one purple and burgundy wine. Like there's nothing else on my desk that's dark. I'm like, it has to be that. But I don't think the value shifts, which is what will mess you up more. So you might get like not the color you were hoping for or expecting, but as long as you're kind of, I could come in here with this purple, and if I get it similar in value to that lighter green, it's not gonna look like it the color is different, but it's not gonna look way out of place. But if you end up messing up values, that gets you more. I have a figure in any article I write about contrast, I probably put this one in. That's not completely true, but I put her in a lot. It's like a Victorian lady, and I'd started the figure, and then like I'd painted several sections, and then I don't know what happened. Like I probably had a project, and I got distracted, and she just sat and sat and sat on the shelf. And like she sat and sat to the point where I had like leveled up by the time I came back to her. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm going to come back and add more contrast. I'm going to come back and like edit this figure. And I did the skin, and she's got like turquoise ribbons. And then her dress was this kind of purple. And I couldn't remember what colors I'd used. So I guess right on the other two things, but I guess wrong on the dress. And now it's more like a deep magenta. So even though I didn't repaint anything, I was just kind of in there fixing the, adding darker shadows and adding brighter highlights. And I was doing it with very much the wrong colors. And it did color shift the whole thing. Sorry, there's a cat hair on here I'm trying to find. But it wasn't... I didn't imperil or have to do everything from scratch because I was pretty much matching the values, at least the values I started with, and then I was going darker or lighter because that was the whole point of the adding more contrast. But by starting with those similar values, that's almost always true. That if you keep values similar, like you don't have to stress out that, oh, I don't remember the exact mix that I used to paint this whatever. It's like, okay, get something in the ballpark, make sure the values match, and you're fine. No one is ever likely to notice. I mean, okay, that dress was noticeable because I went that far off of what I had originally. But it still looks good. Like, it wasn't like it looked messed up. And people, I do like the original color that I used. And then later I found the paper where I wrote that down, what I had done originally. It's like, oh, well, this is what it looks like now. And I still haven't finished her. Oh, is the sad end of the story. There's like, I think she's almost done. There's 4 of them. There were 4 Victorians. I think only 3 of them made it to bones. But these ones, like, I started back when they were only in metal. And I wanted to finish them all so that I could do the bases all at once. And there's one that still doesn't even have paint on it. So the 2 ladies are almost done. The guy is pretty much done apart from the base. And then one of the ladies I haven't even started yet. But I do want to finish them some days because, they did end up kind of being, I learned a lot with that experience of coming back to that miniature and trying to improve the contrast and stuff. And I like them. And I've put enough work into them that I would like to finish them, but they just never really get prioritized as a product. Alright, I think I almost have all these tentacles beefed up. Oh, this guy is clearly not beefed up. It's not even light green on the end. So this one got messed up on paint session 1. Because that's not plastic showing through, that's me not making it light enough. That middle color. The darker green. And then grab a little bit of those purples. But I'm not going to worry about them too much now because I do know that I can easily put them back in later. I like to glaze. I have a few friends who do not, and I am puzzled by it, but I respect that different people like different things. Glazing seems so easy to me compared to some other things. But my friend does not feel that way. But that's the new hot craze with the overpainting and slap chop and whatnot. When I was experimenting with the Reaper version of those paints, which if you were watching before ReaperCon, you probably saw those episodes. I have been finding that I'd rather go back in and add shadows than go back in and add highlights. So I want to keep things, bright and light. And then I can always add more shadows. But it seems like a lot of people would rather do, pre-shading or work with highlights. So that everybody finds they like different things. And that is okay. That's part of what makes our hobby fun. Alright, I probably missed some things in the chat. Oh, see, I did not match the value, so it looks... And that's okay. Like, learning to see the values is tough. Seeing value in color, like it's relatively easy in black and white. For Halloween, I painted that vampire guy, and I forgot to bring him over in black and white. So that episode Should be up on Reaper's YouTube channel, I would imagine. And that's a good exercise to do, and it's going to be a lot easier because you're not trying to manage everything at once. You're not trying to manage color and value and saturation. You've taken away 2 of those, and all you have is value. Because that and the one I did for the previous Halloween that was a different color scheme but also monochromatic are the only miniatures I finished on stream in one go, I think. Because I am slow. And always happen. Alright. Said I was good. But yes, I think it's time for the big brush, or the big imprecise brush, to go away. And look for a brush with a little more of a nice tip. Okay, now I've lost my sponge. Hold on. I like to use the sponge to wick my brush for people who are new. So it's dampened, so it's not going to steal all the moisture off the brush when I'm forming the tip. So, you know, you'll if you just dip a brush into a glob of paint, let's zoom back in, you will get a glob of paint. And often, even if you're a little more cautious than I was there, or than I actually am in real life, like there's still a little bit of a blob there. But if I kind of circle it on my paper towel, or in this case, damp sponge, I form the tip and I take off the excess paint so that I know that I have a controlled amount of paint. So complete opposite of what I was doing just now with the messy brush, where I'm like globbing on all kinds of paint because I want a wet blend, so I want there to be lots of paint there to, you know, manipulate with the brush. This would be like more precise. Oh, hi, well, bye, Shalafi, I guess, actually, because you're heading out. Thanks for joining us today. So I don't know if we've had people come in the middle. We have been talking about Ed some, so if you'd like to talk about Ed and share some Ed stories, talk about how you feel. I figured this is, I wanted to, even though I've had a back problem recently, I wanted to try and come on. I figured I was well enough, but given what's happened, I think we need our community. We need these opportunities to be with other people who are having similar feelings. And if you don't know who Ed is and you're not having similar feelings, that's fine. You're still welcome on the channel here. He put Reaper on Twitch and YouTube and everything, so he'd be fine with whoever you are, however you got here. But for those of us who are longer time Reaper fans, we had the shocking news that the CEO of Reaper died last week. And we're all kind of working through that. So why not work through it together? I'm just adding some water to my paints because even though I live in a very humid place, comparatively, I mean, I know a lot of painters from Denver and other dry places in Colorado, and I really have no idea how they paint. Or how they do other things, because I feel like you must get super dry skin there. I mean, I get dry skin here. And they genuinely call it like a drought here if we haven't had rain in like 9 days or something. And I mean, I'm making that sound like it's real stupid. We do start having risk of fires and stuff because there's so much vegetation around here that if it does get dry, that is problematic. So I'm not mocking the weather people seem like they get more wrought up about stuff than they used to. Like everything has a name and it's a severe weather warning, and it used to just be like it was pretty windy today. You wouldn't panic about it. Panic gets the views, I guess. All right, I'm trying to mix a lighter thing for the ends of my tentacles. I was using that ogre skin. I don't want to say minotaur. There is a minotaur paint, and it's a very lovely brown. It would not help in this function at all. This is ogre skin, plus my camouflage green or whatever it is. Knoll pelt. I'm really good at knowing the names of paints. Actually, I do know a lot of the names of paints. Just not today, apparently. But I feel like that's a little too saturated. Although you generally want to go more saturated with highlights. So maybe I'll try it. Maybe we'll try it out first before I say I need to add some white or something to tone it down. If I were not painting on stream, I would go and rinse that sponge out, because after all the wet blending, it is very saturated with water and also a lot of paint from me prepping the brush on it. So I tend to like to rinse it out if I've been messy. So now I'm being, I can be a little more precise. I'm not going to work wet. I'm going to work dry, but I'm going to use stipple strokes to kind of keep the edges a little blurry. And this is organic, so I'm cool with it looking organic. But I got to remember my pinks. I wanted to bring in some pinks. It was more important to do it on the darker parts, to me anyway. But why not also have it on some lighter parts? And then if I find the edge is too murky with the pink or whatever, I can come back in with my other color. I can go back and forth. I've got my original greens too. Now it is getting a little wet. I probably do need to let it sit for a minute. And that's fine. I'll just work on a different one. That's what happens when I don't form my brush. Now, that's the thing you can do. You can kind of put your brush against the surface to make it flat. There are things that you can do with that. But that is not what I want for doing stipply things. I want a nice round tip. So I need to make sure I form that. Where was the tentacle I started with? There we go. I'll just move over this one. I mean, maybe I should work on all the values on one instead of skipping to the next light one. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to know if I liked my colors for the light bits. And I didn't form my tip, but I can come and do it on something on my miniature or my holder as well. Or my finger, which I'm not saying I recommend, but definitely does happen. Now I gunked up my brush. Yeah, I really hope I'm not making you all seasick with my constantly turning this guy backwards and forwards. But it's just weird shapes. So it helps to move it around a little. I think I'm just embracing this being very organic and freckly as it moves up from the tip. To kind of mesh in with the sculpting. We don't only have to mesh colors, we can mesh textures as well. I do a mix of paint and textures that go with the sculpted textures. Hey Zachariah, how are you? Oh, I'm glad you like how he looks so far. But now I'm curious, I want to know what's going to go on if I try some of my pinks and purples up higher. But where I was willing to mix with the other brush, I don't want to mix with this brush. If I can avoid it. Get my janky brush. Just try working some of these pinks. I don't know if I think that pink got watered down a little. I can get some fresh. It's funny, like the paint's dry, it's watery. I mean, I did put some water in some of it, but I think I'd rather just get out fresh paint. I love working with fresh paint. When I use a wet palette, it really is just for that session. It's not to maintain the paint. I would rather maintain the paint in other ways. Or just mix it again, if I have to. Always kind of thought it was better to save my time than save some paint, but that is something everyone decides for themselves, I guess. Now, I genuinely do not remember what pinks I used on the brain parts. If I went back and watched the show, I could find out. I know I had picked like a whole bunch of pinks off the shelf for that episode. So there's a lot of things it could be. But I'm pretty sure these pinks seem like they're going with them. That is too light in value. For sure. But it's okay. I can come back and work over it again when it dries if I'm not being very successful doing it now while it's wet. And I'm still going to go back in and put more of that burgundy wine. And what was the purple? It sticks purple. All right, I'm going to pause a minute and stretch things out a little. While I'm doing that, we can look at this miniature. Hello. Hello, camera. Okay, well now you're looking at it, I bet you're looking at Claire. There we go. This is the Kathy Wapple tribute miniature. I did admittedly forget to check this morning, but it was there like a day or so ago when I last looked at the Reaper site. I believe Ron said there are only 1,000 of these. So these are a charity fundraising effort for Kathy and Jim Wapple, who are big people in the miniature community. And Kathy's dealing with cancer, so they have a lot of expenses and stuff to deal with. So Reaper is very kindly helping out with this tribute miniature, which is one of the cool things that Ed did in his life. There have been a lot of charity miniatures over the years, and in fact, I think the Ukraine one is also still up on the site if you scroll like down to the bottom of the front page, and it says that the money is still going to help people in the Ukraine who are dealing with the war. I hope I didn't just get paint all over myself. Because it turns out I got paint here, and I don't know if it was wet when I was touching my shirt. Who knows? But yes, so if either or both of those appeal to you, hop on over to Reaper's site and grab them. I always loved that Reaper did that. And that Jason Wiebe donated his time on both of those, actually. I think Jason was the sculptor for both of those fundraising figures. But it's pretty cool of Reaper to do that, I think. Dark Sword also sold a metal version, but they have sold out of theirs. And I have one of those somewhere. I've been debating painting it. If I paint it, I probably would paint the metal version because, on stream, I mean, I am a slow painter, and if there is an option for, a metal one that I can prep more to my preferences and whatnot, then I would probably put the time into there since the sculpt is the same. I mean, I guess the end results could be very slightly different because the molding process would have been different between those two. It's different companies and different materials for the mold as well as the end result. But I shouldn't think that they are wildly different. And it's not like Reaper and Dark Sword aren't friends. So yeah. And then I'm trying to pull back. This is not for my back. This is to, it's good to, get a look at your work. Sometimes even away from the lights, away from the magnifier. That's why I like to put things. I have a shelf that's roughly eye level, and I put my work in progress things there. And that's why I said I've been staring at this guy for 2 weeks and thinking he needed some pink, and that's what's happened. Is he's on that shelf, and I pass by that shelf, and it gives me a chance to go, oh, there's not enough contrast on that. You can't see the folds of the cloak or whatever, or to see that there's just something that's not right about the colors or something I'd like to do instead. And so I'm just checking to see, even though the pink is pretty subtle, I think it does add something that I'm not seeing here. So I think I'm happy. I think that's what I wanted. I might add more pink, I don't know, but it's accomplishing what I was thinking of when I was looking at that figure, when I would pass by, when I was wandering through my room and go, geez, I really feel like that. The center of those could use some pink. So I'm happy. That pink is too pink. We'll go to the one that's mixed with green. So I can compare her again to my haven't messed with it side. And yeah, I think I'm happy. But now let's mess with the shading a little more. I'm going to thin down that burgundy wine, which is a pretty potent color. And the Styx purple is a very dull purple, comparatively speaking. But it is pretty opaque straight out of the bottle, so I'm going to make sure I thin that down as well. But I'm not being like super scientific or feeling like I need to get a weld palette or something to make these things super thin. I just want them, somewhat transparent so they're not totally covering over all the green. But I do want a little more depth of shadows. Because the tentacles are cylinders. I mean, there's an edge on some of these, but overall, and particularly as it gets closer to the body, they're cylinders like my brush. But my brush is very shiny, so it's not an amazing example. Do I have anything else? What does this do if we put it under the light? And then my lights are kind of in the wrong place too, is my other problem. But So for a cylinder, you know, it'll be lighter here and then darker as it curves away from the light. So you make something look rounder, and that includes like arms and legs or cylinders, by having it sort of lighter in the center or just like up here, depending on where your light source is, and then darker as it curves away. So I want shadow to the sides here and then like light here on the upright ones. But on this more horizontal one, I would want light here and then the darker shadow curves downwards. And I can't really worry about the other side because it is not, it's up against that other tentacle, so it's not that accessible. I don't have to worry about it. And then do I need to go even darker than this? I might, because, that's crevices between areas. While that thin paint is still watered down, it's easy to smooth out the edge if I got it not exactly where I wanted it. And then if I got too much of it, although I think that might have been pre-existing, I'm not sure, I can come back in with that layer color. And since this kind of bends, I want to shade it a bit there and introduce more of the purple. So I'm using the slightly lighter Sticks Purple, but I think that I've thinned it out more. And it's not as potent a color. That's also why it's not going to have as much of an effect. And here I am doing it more for shading purposes than because that's the color variation. Like, I haven't really decided that the color variation would be like that in that section, but I want that section to recede because it's not just going down, it's going under. Well, it's hard to, let's try it that way. So it's going downwards, so the light's definitely not getting under here. I do feel like I need just a little more for in between the tentacles. So because I'm very predictable sometimes, I would probably just mix my burgundy wine with some blue liner to make it darker. But still thin it down quite a bit. I don't want to have the edges be noticeable. Because that's one of the areas where people you'd worry more about blending a little bit. I mean, not like having super smooth blending, but that thing where, it's shadow as the light curves away. If you look at an arm under if you hold your arm out and look at it, you'll see that the shadow, it's pretty gentle. The transition from where it's light to shadow is pretty smooth. And I think that's one reason people kind of get hung up on smooth shading, is because we are used to seeing that for, like, if you think of cloth folds and like the arm, like I said, and a number of other things, we're used to seeing that transition from light to shadow be fairly smooth. yes, I am adding texture, but we don't see texture as much in the shadows of things. So even if it's getting glared out with light, which is not. I mean, this guy's not under spotlight or something, but I mean, say he was like a angler fish and he had a little thing hanging off where my brush is, and this was lit up, the texture wouldn't be as apparent there. Because like the idea of overexposing something, this guy would be overexposed, as it were, and you would lose details. Have I almost painted one whole tentacle? I don't know. Not sure that I have. Need more pink. I think I'm getting close though. But some of that was me working stuff out. Like it would take less time to paint the other ones because I've worked out the paint mixes and all that kind of stuff now. I mean, assuming I don't get distracted, it will take less time. Sometimes I get into what I'm doing and take more time. On occasions where I don't have deadlines, which I don't actually have deadlines right now. I couldn't take work if I wanted to right now because of my back. Because I'm definitely not going to keep painting after the show. The test run's gone pretty well, but I'm going to call it a day and not tempt my back to get too cheesed off at me. Go stand up for a while, do my stretches. Oh, there's one amazing tentacle. It is not an amazing tentacle. Maybe we need to go even just a bit of, I'm going to use yellow mold. Yellow mold, I love yellow mold. But it should be the perfect color to add just one. There's my vortex mixture for a minute. Add just a little more color to that lighter green that I mixed for the tentacles. I mean, just a little more lightness to that color at the very end of them. Although it also adds just a lot more opacity, but that's okay. Quindy has shared links to the Kathy Wappel mini and the Ukrainian relief miniature. So if you haven't gotten one of those yet, and the Ukrainian one is this adorable little bird bard. And I have some episodes where I was painting that on my channel. Then I have another paint job of him that I worked on when I was at Reaper for the Kickstarter part, the end of Kickstarter party. Since everything's done digital now, it's often hard to have things ready for the painters in a timely, when painters might be available, like or as early in the process as it used to be. Let's put it that way. So there wasn't really anything for me to paint at the time. I had a project I was working on, but that was unrelated to Kickstarter, and I couldn't work on it the whole time. So instead, when I kind of was just looking to fill some time, I would work on a different version of the Ukrainian miniature, but using the paints that were in the Kickstarter. So it's all the Kickstarter colors, both the existing, and they had done prototypes of the new, so that was a way to test them. Right. Which I have swatches of those somewhere. I did a show where I swatched those out. If you're curious to see the colors before you decide if you want to add them to your pledge, I have a show where I swatch them out. I mean, not that the camera is exactly like what you'll see in your hand, but it's a real color as opposed to the computer graphic swatches that are on the Kickstarter page and probably in the pledge manager thingy. But I don't, the little swatches that are in the stores do up there, and not just like everybody's little squares in the web store. Those may or may not be very accurate to the color. I mean, the hue can be off kind of in that way where I was showing the drying shift. It can be like that, or even more dramatic where you think something's like a yellowy green, but really it's more of a bluey green. But the value is often way, way off on those. So that I like to do swatches for you all when there are new colors so that you can get a more accurate idea. I don't think I ever did photograph those. Sometimes I try to photograph them and then color correct them to the rough ability that I have in that area. Which is basically just me in Photoshop going, oh, does this look more like what I'm seeing with my eyes or not? Color correct implies maybe fancier thing than I'm actually doing. Get it darker on the underside. Although I may end up doing something different with the suckers. I don't know. I don't know. That's one of those things where I'm just not even thinking about that part yet. I'll get there when I get there. Fortunately, I made paint pools that are pretty wide, so they are drying out a lot. I'll go back to wondering how people paint in dry climates. Oh, do we have a little kitty here to say hello to you today? I think we might. Do you want to say hello, kitty? Oh, you're eating your crunchies. Give her a minute to eat her crunchies. And then we'll make Ella come and say hello. Well, that's one of the other things I haven't been able to do is hold Ella up the way she likes. So I have to go lie down on the bed and let her sit on my chest instead. Come here, boo boo. Here, say hi to everybody. They love you. They think you're so cute. Because you are so cute. You go say hi. So yeah, she loves this, but when everything was really sore, I couldn't handle holding her up like this. Even though that's not the bad shoulder. But, well, why are you making a mean face? Make your happy face. Make your happy face. Is that your sleepy face? I think that might be the sleepy face. Ella always seems like she needs somebody to invent cat coffee when she first wakes up. She takes a minute to wake up. You want to go down? Okay. I did interrupt your snack. That is Ella. Ellisond is her full name. I still cannot pick Corbin up with my with my back. My back's gonna have to get a lot better before I'm picking Corbin up. He is a lot of cats. And he doesn't like being picked up, so. But then he makes these goofy faces and like makes you want to pick him up. It's so indignant. He's kind of like, I work so hard to get huge, so you couldn't do that to me anymore. Well, he worked so hard to get huge because he lived on the street for a while, and I don't think he's ever forgotten the scarce days. He's like, I better stock up for later. And he has certainly stocked up. Like he's not quite a lot. He's coming size on the cat fatness chart, but he's only 1 or 2 down from that. And that is a real cat fatness chart. If you've never seen it, hopefully you can find it. It's the pictures from the real one that the vet has, just with the chonk appropriate captions. And I'm on this Facebook group called "This Cat is a Chonk." Or no, "This Cat is Chonky." This cat is chonky, and people post many, many hilarious photos there. If you need cheering up, as we all do right now, that is a good place to go. I mean, assuming you enjoy a chonky cat. Maybe you don't. That is valid too. Oh, I'm stirring with my good brush. Oh. It is not the end for that brush. I did, so a while back, I signed up for Amazon affiliates. Not because I'm expecting to make $1 million, because far from it. But I share links anyway, and I'm only going to share links, or I'm always going to be honest about the links that I share. But like when I write those articles about how to store your paints or stuff like that, I'm like, well, I'm putting Amazon links in anyway for people to see examples of. So on the offhand chance that someone wants to, this is a way that will help me take time away from commission painting and do more blog writing and maybe even videos one day and stuff. So they send me all these notes now. So like they send you notes about stuff like Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And every now and then they'll send me, like these are things that will interest your readers. And I'm like, nope, not even close. You've seen, like, the people who have bought things, it's like they bought these visors, and I think like the I got like an essential oil holder for my paints that I keep here, the set and stuff like that is what people have bought. And I'm like, okay, why are you showing me fashion and makeup and stuff like that? That is not what the people who are on my page are remotely interested in. But anyway, I went through some of the sales to see if there was anything of interest to miniature painter, and there was actually some like miniature specific items even. But I posted some links on my Facebook page if you're interested, which is just burnt with a brush. All right, there I messed up the whole value thing. So I need some shadows there, but that shadow did not seem like the correct shadow. What can I do instead? Take a little bit of the pink. Thinning down shadows usually helps. Wendy has linked to my other places where I do things, if you are interested. I got excited at first because they were showing me some Liquitex things, and there are a few, but it's like individual things are on sale, not even if you're in the same listing and you go look at, like, there's a gloss thing on sale, but if you go look at the matte thing, it's not on sale. It's like, well, this is disappointing, and I was hoping they'd have the texture paste that I showed you guys a few weeks ago when we did the base things, but alas, those were not on sale. But with fine art stuff, if you do shop Amazon, if you're in the US at least, I always recommend that you go look at Dick Blick and Jerry's Artarama because their prices are often lower. They don't do the free ship. I mean, they do free shipping, but you have to order like a few things. But if you need some sable brushes and you want to get some of these texture pastes and other things enough to get the free shipping, you will definitely pay less usually than you will pay on Amazon. So by fine art, I mean like gold and Liquitex, that kind of thing. I honestly have not really priced miniature paint. There was one paint deal for Army Painter, I think, which I haven't used their paint, so I can't really comment. There were actually a surprising number of like tufts, and there were a few things like so they didn't have the texture paste, but there was stuff like the gravel that you can glue down. There was some of that in the Cyber Monday thing. I was hoping there'd be a wider variety of like the Liquitex things, but alas, it was not so. I want that to be a little lighter, but that was looking weird for some reason. I want that to be a lot darker. My thin down glaze washy things, I probably should have done it on a separate palette because they were drying out so fast. If you are not very familiar with using a wet palette, they do work well, but there are ways that they work that are not obvious. At least they were not obvious to me when I first started trying, and I got frustrated with them. So let's zoom out and look at my palette to see what's going on. Because even though I've not been here very long, and this is, it rained like a lot yesterday, so it cannot possibly be that dry in here despite the central heat. But these things, like this is the most recent paint I mixed. I added water to that burgundy wine with the color shift, and then I made a mix of burgundy wine and blue liner, and I also had to add water to that, so the pools got bigger and bigger, and this is almost dry. And that's like the most recent paint that I mixed. And here I was grabbing some of the darker green and some of this pink and mixing it, and that's almost dry, where the actual pools are better. And then the smallest pool, where I dished out the burgundy wine just to test the color shift again, and then this pool is fine. So a wet palette works best if you can keep the, when the paint drops stay as small as possible, they will stay hydrated longer. But thinning and spreading out the paint makes it dry faster. And I'm definitely experiencing a lot of that right now. And I think that I am very out of practice painting in winter, is what I'm learning. Oh, I guess I can zoom in back in now. Is it focusing? There we go. All right. Get all that sticks purple down there. And I need the sticks purple, but just a little bit lighter to do the, the shadow rolling away thing on that tentacle. Just gonna try to feather out the edge a little. Something looks weird in there. think there's an abrupt transition. What looks weird. So yeah, this may be a time of year when it's good to add some retarder to your paint. KTC is asking how I decide my color palette and which colors will go together. Sometimes I do tests, so I'll grab pieces of paper. I don't know if I have an example, but I might. So this would be an example of seeing whether things would work as a shadow and highlight for one another. So this is a very dark purple, I think. I don't think it is. Don't think it's burgundy wine. I think it's purple. A true purple, I guess. And then the brick color, and then like a light color skin tone. So I can do something like this and see if, the in-between things look like they're okay, and then is the overall impression okay. This is another kind of color shift where going from like a blue, yellow, you're going to get some light green, and then I think a dark blue at the bottom. I don't know if I like this part, but I found that out here on paper instead of on miniature, so I could just try something else. I don't think I have any examples with me, but I've done like more extensive testing than that, where I'll, maybe even do like a really rough sketch of the figure and paint on the colors and see if I feel like the different areas go together. Or you can kind of do that on like a computer and iPad. You can even get the picture that Reaper has on the web store, because it's usually white with gray shadows, and then you lower the opacity on that in one layer, and you work over that with colors in another layer, and you kind of use it like a coloring book and test out various color combinations. But remembering that matching digital colors to physical colors can be challenging. So that kind of just gives you a general idea. You're not being super precise about the colors. And I do have an example of doing that on my website with the Fathom character that I play on. Well, we're on hiatus right now, but the Reaper Errant D&D stream, I had to paint my character for that because we have these like lovely boards and everything. And I was really internally wrestling. Like, I just was not sure what color I wanted to paint. So I did that digital testing thing. There are also several examples on my website of doing more physical testing, but I'm just not remembering. Well, autumn, fall bards. If you search fall bards, I painted some bards for Dark Sword Miniature with like autumn color schemes, and I did that thing that I was talking about where I did like a really rough sketch of one of the bards and painted the colors in, as well as just doing some other color tests on paper kind of thing. And then so this figure, I didn't do any of that. I painted the pinky ready part previously, and I've been like trying to think what would look cool on the tentacles. And I thought, well, green and red are color complements. So from the point of view of looking good together on the figure, that should work. So I started with that premise, and I picked out, I didn't want to do like pretty greens though, because I'm trying to make this look monstrous. So I picked out like some khaki greens and stuff like that. But then I thought, well, I'm going to have to shade those colors, and purple works well as a shade for a surprising number of colors. It works well on skin, it works well on red, works well on green, works well on blue. So I grabbed some purples with that in mind. And then when I sat down and started to paint, so I started this on a previous show, so not last week, not the week before, but the week before that. And that's up on the YouTube channel now. So that'll be the last thing that you find in the Beyond the Kit channel on Reaper's YouTube channel. While I was painting, I decided I liked the idea of, going from the darker to the lighter, and then having the purple be visible, like not just be for shadow mixing, but be something that's part of the creature. And I kind of left off there where I just had done wet blending to establish that and get some of those purples in. And then today I came in and realized that I hadn't gotten solid coats, so that took a lot of the stream. But now I'm working on refining those color transitions, but also trying to get a sense of highlighting and shading on various surfaces of the miniature. But I am struggling with the whole my paint doesn't want to stay wet deal. And then while in the weeks in between, I was looking at the miniature on my shelf, and I was looking at this. I don't think I've messed. No, I have messed with this side a little. But I was looking at this side, and I just started feeling like it needed some pink. But the more you work with color, and the more you're willing to spend a little bit of time doing tests and stuff like that, the easier it starts getting to make the spur of the moment, like, oh, I think it might look cool if I stuck some pink in that, even though it's green. Type of decisions. And test, yeah, you use some paint, but I'd rather mess up on paper than have to do it again on the figure, because that's happened too. Oh, we've got Raiders. Hello, Raiders. And Zox2277 has subscribed for 27 months. Wow, thank you. Peachy XO rated with 17 Raiders. And we're very happy to have you join us. I think I'm nearing the end. I haven't actually checked the time. Yes, I'm actually slightly over. But I know that when I stop, which will be soon because I got to rest my back, Quindy will find us something else fun that someone's doing that we would enjoy watching. Let me just check if there's any other questions. But yeah, I think I probably have better... Oh, hey, say hi to Erin too. But this is the first time I've painted in two weeks, at least 3 weeks, maybe, because I've been having back problems. So I don't want to go too late today. I'm going to let Quindy find us a raid. But I'm glad that I got to say hi to you before I closed off for the day. So this is where he's at. I mean, it's going a little slower than I expected, but now that I kind of have the idea of where I want the colors to be, if I can figure out how to get the paint to stop drying on me, I think it wouldn't take very long to finish him. So I may do that next stream. We'll see. I may see if I can find something that's a little more of an Ed tribute. And I don't have a house brush. Well, I did, but we did house painting with it and then it got wrecked. But I do have super large art brushes for other things, so I can find my largest brush and a miniature worthy of it and see if I can show you why Ed was the person who knew how to do that, because I don't. But you can go watch his video. And I'm going to let Quindy find us something else to do, because we gotta keep ourselves not thinking about stuff too much right now, I think. So thank you all for joining me. It was really nice to be back. I missed getting to hang out with everybody and paint and all that kind of stuff. Believe me, sitting around having a pinched nerve is just really... Ugh. And my husband's all like, people would love to just sit and watch television for a week. And I'm like, no, they wouldn't. Not if they're getting stabbed the entire time and it's the only thing they can do. When it's the only thing you can do, then it's not fun. You're not choosing to do that. You're being forced to do that. But anyway, Marine Mammal Rescue. You are going to enjoy the otters so much. I'm going to let you go do that. Bye. Thanks for coming.